things like your intestines, the actual bacteria in your intestines, will start eating you once you die, because there's no longer any food coming in, so they'll just start eating you as you rot. But that doesn't happen in mummies because the intestines have been removed, so the body is more preserved. And the sand as well, I think, also helps in preserving them.
William Dale, and I'm 19 years old. I'd often always had problems with spelling, because English is inherently illogical in its spelling. It's a lot like Mandarin, because if you look at Chinese writing, they're not verbal. The writing isn't verbal, it's just symbols. If I wanted to write a lot more, I couldn't do it efficiently relying on English spelling, because I'd have to actually keep skimming through a dictionary to find the spelling, and that was a massive bottleneck in the efficiency. So I realised I needed to develop a shorthand, and I started to identify sounds didn't have letters for them, or didn't have efficient letters for them. I started writing phonetically, and one of my first proposals was cut the letter C. But the thing is, the letter C is an Etruscan invention, because what happened is the Romans learnt to write off the Etruscans, who learnt to write off the Greeks. And the Greeks use the letter K only, they have no C. But the Etruscans removed K and added a C. And they also removed gamma, the Greek G, which is why the Latin G is basically just C with a modification. And I also introduced a new letter, I introduced at one point, which is this kind of line with three other lines going through it, like a triple T. And that was to represent the sound which was the and obviously the and the were represented in runes and are still represented in Icelandic writing, but aren't represented in modern English because the Romans had no th and the. Although the original monks who wrote down English did devise a letter which I'm now using in more modern versions of my writing system. There's a word here, which, double here, with this little thing at the end, if you can see it. That means cha. Then I encountered something called the International Phonetic Alphabet, and I saw it transcribed into English typing for the reformed spelling. Obviously, when the Normans conquered, that meant a lot of new spelling conventions from French were introduced, which meant that you had entirely two essentially parallel spelling mechanisms existing alongside each other. But then with the French, they introduced a whole other set of those ideas. Even though they were only written with 26 letters, had no consistency in how those 26 letters were used. There are a lot of Greek letters, which I did eventually incorporate into my own way of writing. There are endless Greek letters. I ended up trying to create a whole new alphabet system, a whole new what's called a featural system, a lot like Korean, and I tried writing English that way without any resemblance to Latin, but now not only was kind of a dead end, and I realised that was just silly and unproductive and I wouldn't really understand it. It was just a strange way of... I'm not entirely sure why I did it that way, and I'm also not entirely... It's probably a lack of understanding of the IPA, I believe. And this Greek letter here, meaning KH. And here is one of my first early standardizations of what my new alphabet would look like. A lot of things have changed since the original, including the inclusion of this thing, because this here is one of the Greek letters, theta, meaning because and th are separate, like S and Z are separate. English spelling reform, spelling things how they sound, has been a dream of mine for as long as I can remember. This is the official kind of standard I set right at the end. And this was set sometime around early 2019, around that time period. So several months after I first started it, and all these letters are typable, at least in theory, into a computer. So I've essentially achieved my objective, which was I had since a child, which was making English pronounced how it sounds, and I've done that in the most technical way I could.